Hi, everybody. It's Nick and Pat here again. Welcome to another NeQter Labs town hall. Just to kind of give you guys an overview of what we're going to be doing today. Obviously, we don't have any new updates out yet, but we are going to be reviewing what we have coming up in the near future. So feel free to ask any questions about what we have coming out. And then after that, we're going to try and open it up as much as possible to give you guys the maximum amount of time to ask us any questions and review anything specific that you're looking for in the platform.
Awesome.
And yeah,
Yeah. So we can get started with that. So this is Pat from Nectar, as you've come to know. So today we're really just going to be going over the kind of a preview that we have for 2023. There are going to be some more things that are going to be coming to fruition in Q1. But yeah, this call today is really just going to be just highlighting some things that are going to be coming shortly, and also reviewing any Q&A that you have. But as Nick mentioned, we will be having an update coming out in future. But for the past couple months, we've been reviewing some of the same old in the platform. So we'll look to have this as a condensed webinar today, uh, without any new features to review. That will be reserved for the next webinar. So some things that we have today just to discuss for 2023. We have switched to a new hardware provider. So in past, or actually since day one, we were utilizing Supermicro. So we have switched to Asus, and that new Asus hardware is going to be for, moving forward, and is really going to be focused for new clients that we add, and then also anyone who has had their units in the field for 4 or 5 years that may be out of warranty. With those super micros, we had those with the 3 year through the distributor. And we do have quite a few clients who are still utilizing it 4 and 5 years into their license and service with us. So that will be an option to rotate to the new hardware. And on the next webinar, we'll be able to review what that process looks like. We'll be able to preview what that hardware looks like as well. And the new hardware is going to allow us to be a little more flexible from the Super Micro, and just in terms of warranty and service, and also some add-on modules outside of the kind of the standard hardware that we provide. It will allow for some more build-up, some more flexibility there. So that is something I'll be able to touch upon more for our webinar next month as we kind of iron out that process. So, stay tuned for that. Just wanted to give you a preview now of what that's going to look like. And something else that we're doing in the midst of, currently is a SOC as a service pilot. We are hoping to come out with SOC as a service as an offering early next year, and we're currently in the midst of a couple pilots. Um, what that looks like is essentially we have a trusted third party that has a SOC as a service as an offering that they have been providing for several years. And what we're going to be doing is having the ability to tie NeQter into that SOC. And essentially, what that means is you're going to be able to maintain your license as per usual. We'll just be replicating and sending the logs from your system to that secure third-party SOC. So we're in the process right now of piloting that. They're a no-cost 90-day pilot. We do have some spots open for that still, so if you are interested, please reach out to me, Patrick, and you will be able to, we can talk through what that looks like, and what the follow-on service and pricing may look like. So it's an established service that we are going to look to provide. So we're just working through kind of the what the SLAs look like, what the service looks like, making sure that there's no issues before we go and launch that for 2023. So just wanted to clue you into that. That is on the horizon. We are working through that right now. And if you want any more details on how to be a pilot or just some, um, you know, preliminary information on what that SOC as a service is going to look like next year, again, please reach out on that. Um, so with that, that's kind of what I was looking to cover today. Any and of course, any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I apologize. I just looked now and noticed that there was a request for more volume from my mic. So let me just see if I can address that real quick. Um, but Nick, any other questions that you see or anything in chat?
I haven't seen anything pop up yet. Just John looking for that extra volume. John, is there anything that you missed from what Patrick just went over because of the volume issue that you want us to explain again, or?
Okay, I think I just addressed it. And then one thing that I just wanted to highlight, something that we were able to see, which was nice, was we did an in-person install. It's been a while since I've been on one for a local client to us in Rhode Island, and we were able to, and it was a very small machine shop, it was actually about less than 10 devices or rather less than 10 desktops and laptops, but of course they have a shop floor, so it was about 30 or 40 different OT and IoT devices and other things. Um, so we were able to leverage heavily the unknown device area of hosts, which leverages the vulnerability scanner from a discovery standpoint, and we were able to, of course, deploy out the NeQter agents to all of the Windows devices, but the unknown device area was nice because we were able to identify certain things, like for example, they had a NAS, like a Buffalo NAS, that hadn't received an agent, but we were able to configure and pull a syslog from. We were also able to identify some end of life operating systems, which were Windows 8.1 and Windows XP, but they were embedded, of course, into some shop floor equipment and machinery. So can't easily replace that, so that's a mitigating factor when it comes to compliance. But it was just nice to walk through and see the effective use of the unknown devices, and then be able to add those and reconcile them into the inventory area, and also see available ports and other items that were effectively open on those systems, to be able to either monitor those ports, or just be able to see, or rather, we walked through using the unknown devices, opening the ports, and essentially finding the management consoles and being able to go, oh, okay, that's my Buffalo NAS. Let me add that in. Let me add a tag. So it was just nice to go through that workflow with that local client. And based upon our last webinar, kind of talking through pairing up MAC addresses as an identifier. So if there is any fluidity or change in an IP for a system that is added to the inventory, just making sure it doesn't get kicked back into as an unknown device. That is something that we are working on and will be able to address, not with our next update, but probably going into January of next year, just to kind of solve that problem that we have seen. And so, just a question from Steve: when is the new hardware available and cost? So, the new hardware is available as of today. So it can be something that we are able to procure and fulfill for you. We just haven't. It's kind of been a somebody reaches out, or we've been more targeted with our outreach of that because we're going through. We've gone through onboarding and fulfillment and have deployed out new systems to clients, but we just want to make sure that process is ironclad before we potentially have okay, let's do a 50 system turnover or turnaround. So that is available today, and we do have pricing for that. The pricing is a little bit more than the hardware in past, just because it's a little bit more expensive with the new manufacturer. But for example, a tier one system will fetch about $3,000 new. So, and I'll have to get the pricing for the other tiers, but we can definitely have an offline discussion on that. But when we have it, we'll have that more publicly available for the new hardware, that new ASUS hardware. And fortunately, with the new distributor that we're leveraging, we will be able to offer up to 5-year warranties, as well as a keep your drives warranty paired up with that warranty. So those are some add-ons that would be in addition to the that base cost, but just to flex up those warranties, but be able to have them in the field for 5 years, but fully covered, which is nice, and we will be supporting those throughout the life cycle. So we'll be able to get into that as we definitely more next month, but can absolutely have a dialogue now about getting that switched over, or just getting you prepared for next year pricing, or maybe working it into your budget for 2023. Yeah, so that's everything on the hardware side. And again, we can, if there's any Q&A on how to do something, an overview of a certain feature, um, we can we can definitely go over that now. But don't want to beat a dead horse with anything, as I know we've been going over similar areas for the past couple monthly webinars. But the reason we have these is just to make sure that someone who might have missed a past webinar is up to date, or as new features come out, or as new questions pop up, we're able to address them. One thing I have mentioned in past that I do want to bring up again is we are going to be adding our compliance guide as a tab onto the documentation site here. We do currently have it in PDF form. So if you would like to gain access to our compliance guide that covers all of the areas of the NIST or CMMC compliance that we address, and it does go down to the assessment objective level, we are able to get that to you. So another question here. NeQter is provided as a hardware appliance. It can be spun up as a virtual machine. We have several clients who leverage a virtual machine version of our license. The most common out there are small office sizing as well as tier 1 sizing, but we do have quite a few clients who do use a tier 2 size VM, and we also recently this year have our first tier 3 virtual machine user. Um, so it can be replicated as long as you have the same, obviously, the same resources at the hardware level. Most important resource being RAM as well as solid state storage. If you try to procure a virtual machine with hard drives, it's going to have a bad time. It's not going to be as effective, and in some cases may not run just because of the heavy resource load of the SIM and the vulnerability scanner. So if you were looking to potentially, if you have maybe a dated system that's been out and you've been using for 3 or 4 years or so and want to transition over to a virtual machine, we can absolutely walk you through that process. Um, so, and we are, and I'll be able to talk about this next month because we're going through the process of formalizing as a Microsoft partner. We have had clients been able to spin up our VM of NeQter in Azure, and we are going to look to have an Azure native VM. So we're going to look to have NeQter available in the Azure marketplace. So that is something that we're going to look to hopefully achieve by December, but if not, 2023, that's going to be an initiative as well. So if you have Azure, infrastructure, or would like to procure Azure infrastructure, you'll be able to find NeQter Labs on the Azure marketplace. So that's something that we're finalizing in the coming weeks. So to sum up, you can either, if you like to, shift to a new hardware with the Asus hardware that we have, transition over to a virtual machine that you host internally, or be able to spin up NeQter as an Azure virtual VM through the Azure Marketplace. So a couple different ways that you're going to be able to um, spin up NeQter. And also, just as a nuance, you can spin it up in Azure right now. We do have the tools to do that for you. It's just not, it won't show up in Azure Marketplace. So that is an additional wrinkle that we're looking to add. So we've we can definitely talk about this more because I know you're very experienced with this, Nick. Right now, we've tested it out in Azure Commercial. Um, I believe that we have a client who's looking to spin it up in GCC or GCC High, but that's just not a test that we've gone through. I don't see why it would not be able to easily transition over between commercial and GCC High, but I know that well, Halloween is over, but some spooky things can always happen in GCC High, or some things might not work. So that's something that we need to test through, but we will look to have that provided on government and the Azure Marketplace on commercial and government. So question, if we spin up an Azure VM, can we import our existing presence in place? So with NeQter, you are able to back up the configs and load them up into a new license. And then you are able to basically export your logs and then make them available in the new license, but I don't believe you are able to copy them off fully and then repopulate them in the new license. But that's a process I'll look to check on that. Um, and again, kind of, we do want to basically we have a process to do that now, but we're just going to revisit and basically finalize that process, as I mentioned, because we are looking to provide this to, because I believe we have at least um, 50 to 100 clients who might have a system that is 4 or 5 years old, or at least approaching 3 years. So as you can imagine, that's going to put a load on our support team. So we're just going to make sure that we have an efficient, replicatable process. We have done it in past, but we want to make sure that we have a quick turnaround with multiple clients. So either to a new hardware or to a new VM, whether it be local or in the cloud. We're just going to look to kind of get that knowledge base, get that paperwork together. So with Azure, so is there an additional charge to change to Azure? So with NeQter, no, the licensing is still going to be the same. But yes, you will have to lease resources from Microsoft in order to spin up that VM essentially. So we've been able to see, depending on the size, like a tier one, for example, it typically might fetch if you're able to lock in resources for like a 1 year or 3 year, which they have massive discounts or price reductions. We have seen it be to 40 to 60 dollars per month to lease that out. Obviously, with more resources, like with a tier two or something like that, it's going to be more per month. So yes, there will be an additional charge, not from NeQter itself, but just leasing those resources from Azure. You will incur that additional charge. So, kind of a give and take, right? Because you're going to be having that charge in Azure in lieu of, getting a new piece of hardware. So there's always going to be a resource cost somewhere. Just depends on how you want to serve it up. Um, yeah, and of course, if there's any more nuances or anything specific to your license or your environment, please feel free to reach out direct to have a dialogue about that. But yeah, some big pieces, some big movers. There is actually some more stuff that 2023 is going to allow us to have, but we're working through that internally right now. So we'll definitely have more to announce come next town hall in December and January. Um, let's see here. I noticed in a previous webinar that you had a lot more Windows events being sent by the agents than has set up on your system. You weren't actually, I wasn't even aware I had that kind of control. Can you go over how to add more events and what is the downside to sending more events? And then how can I tell the health of our current NeQter hardware? So let me address the health of the NeQter hardware first, and then I'll get into the events, and those are both great questions. So current NeQter hardware. So obviously, from a NeQter metrics and resources standpoint, you're going to be able to see a breakdown or a quick summarization here on the home screen. And then you're going to also be able to view the dashboard. Now, there's a disk health indicator right here. That does, we do perform a smart check, a smart test on the drives in your system. So yellow or red is going to indicate if there's a potential, disk failure, or a potential, of a disk failure going to happen. So right here, you're going to be able to see that. We also have certain events that are tied to the disk health as well as disk space and utilization. So you're going to be able to see on a timeline here CPU, RAM, and disk utilization. But I think definitely a key indicator is going to be that green or yellow or red indicator for disk health. All of the hardware out there has redundant RAID. With the exception of, so the small office units do have a singular disk. Anything tier one and above is going to either have a mirrored or or striped RAID. So if there is a disk failure, indication of disk failure, you're not going to lose your logs, but that disk will need to be replaced. But of course, that's why, and we've only really had a handful, maybe 3 or 4 disk failures out of the few hundred clients that we have. So that's why we will look to more heavily address rotating out, especially 5 year, and working our way back 4 year and 3 year as a hardware refresh, or as mentioned previously, maybe moving that to a VM or moving that to Azure. So that's how you're able to check up on your NeQter hardware health, with the key indicator being um, that disk health indicator on the main dashboard here. The second question was on the granularity of control of how to add more events into NeQter from say Windows. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to do that in the hosts and the agent manager area. So under agents. So previously, going back with several versions, this was called Agent Manager. Now it's called Hosts, and it has this main inventory splash screen. You're going to be able to go into Agents, and this is where you're going to be able to configure what level of logging that you wish to achieve from each of your Windows systems. So what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to go into, edit this group, and any agent that is in a group is going to absorb the group's settings. So you're going to be able to turn on metrics. You're going to be able to turn on file integrity monitoring. But specifically, what you had asked about was event IDs getting turned on. And you're going to be able to configure that through choose event IDs. So we do have some defaults here for Active Directory monitoring, file monitoring, and local PC monitoring. However, there are a couple hundred different options in here grouped under these different Microsoft categories that you're going to be able to either click on this drop down and select, or you can type in a query for a certain log type, either text-based query, because it does have the event ID number as well as a full description, and this is right from Microsoft Knowledge Base. So anything you type up in here, if you wanted to know about network policy server, I can type in network and it will show up here, or I can type in the specific event ID number to pull up that object access, for example. So very important, this is going to turn on at the agent what the agent is going to listen and forward into the platform. You will still need to change the auditing rule sets at the endpoint level. So you'll have to either change your group policy either on that local machine or on your domain controller, or however you administrate your Windows systems. But that is going to be how you turn on event IDs and then turn them on here to read them and forward them into the platform. The only downside to adding more events could be, influx of more events, and then, eats up more of your disk space. But you're going to be able to track your disk space with that previous dashboard that we were looking at, the health dashboard, so you can gauge how much disk space you're using from a percentage. And additionally, you're going to be able to change your live logs as well as your archive logs if we go into settings, go into backups, and change the day count here. Something that I mentioned in a previous webinar that I just want to reemphasize here, we recommend that you have this set at least to 30 days. Now, there are certain clients who have very, very noisy environments, so they might have to have a lower threshold. But the reason I mentioned 30 days is because if you have a 30, every month or once a month a vulnerability scan. So every 30 days you have a vulnerability scan at the full and fast level. If you don't have this set to 30 days, you're going to miss out on being able to view those results in the hosts and vulnerabilities tab. You're going to be able to always see all of your reports for the vulnerability scanner in the vulnerability scanner area itself. But just for the hosts vulnerabilities area, it's going to show you with the no items to display, because this is tied to how many days of logs that you are. So as we can see here, I haven't run a scan in the last 30 days, or rather the last 45 days. So there are no items to display for me, because those visualized logs have been rotated out. I can go to the vulnerability scanner and view the report in the vulnerability scanner, but I won't be able to see those results for my items in my inventory, for example. So just wanted to highlight that for you. If you go in here and you're unable to see vulnerabilities at the asset level or on the vulnerabilities tab, that is because of that rotation area. And you can, if you wanted to, if you didn't want to have that tied to your backups and retention policies, you can set the vulnerability index as a rotation exception. Um, let's see here. And you'll be able to see the disk space upon each login to the NeQter. Yeah, yep. So as Nick mentioned, yeah, on that splash screen when you log in, you'll be able to see the NeQter health, but you can click into that dashboard for more information. And then lastly, just to answer or round out that event ID question of sending in more logs to the system, if for some reason you added in a event ID and it was being very, very noisy, but you still wanted to have it turned on and just not take up a bunch of space, you can always leverage our log tuner. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to tune out a specific field or value for an index, and it will not drop the log from the system. It will still be searchable in the Discover and the Index area. It just will not show up on a dashboard. So just wanted to highlight that for you. And I just got pinged on one thing to mention, just going back to the VM discussion. So one of the things that we had to do, there are some clients before and as I'm calling it an Azure native VM, as in you're going to be able to, so like for a tier one, for example, where you're it's 4 cores, 32 gigs of RAM, for example, you're going to be able to, prior in Azure, we were using nested VMs, so setting up a hypervisor and then slicing off a piece of the hypervisor to run the VM. So you might have had to double the resource count to run, half the resources, for example. If there's anyone out there that is using a nested VM and would like to transfer to a Azure native VM, so basically just the straight up resources, not having to lease double in the cloud, please reach out and we can perform that transition for you. And just also a shout out for our next update, which will be in the coming weeks. We are wrapping up development and starting testing on that. That is going to include a completely revamped vulnerability scanner. OpenVOS is getting a full update, and we are swapping out the underlying operating system. We're currently on Ubuntu 18. We will be transitioning all the way up to Ubuntu 22. And with that, next year, so Ubuntu 22 has not gone through FIPS 140-2 certification process because we imagine they're going to be going through the 140-3 certification process. When they do that, we will be looking to license out the ability to leverage a FIPS validated module. For that, it will involve a subscription to Ubuntu's support, so that will be an added line item that we're going to be able to offer with the update to the newer Ubuntu. So just wanted to call that out. That is something that's a little bit more nebulous on the FIP side for 2023, but is something that we're going to be keeping our eye on and keeping you informed of as we go through that process. So I think that's a good summary of everything I wanted to mention again and cover. Are there any more questions before we wrap up this month's town hall? Or Nick, was there anything that you think is worth adding?
The only thing I was gonna maybe bring up today was just showing some good examples of alerts to set up. I know we've kind of done that in the past, but
Hmm.
um, I think if no one wants to take a look at that, I think we can probably just wrap things up. Um,
Yeah, we did cover that in a previous town hall. And on the alerts standpoint, that is not something that we have put on a definitive. Well, basically, this update is going to be coming out, and we're going to be meeting internally to determine what our next 6 months looks like. Because this update is taken a lot of bandwidth on the development side because it's a major shift. Under the hood. So we will be revisiting a few things, but alerts are definitely something that are going to be revisited next year. And we're going to look to make making custom alerts easier, but then also we're going to be adding a lot to the library of templated alerts that we have had, and as time has gone on, it's started to get a little lacking. So we're going to be definitely beefing that up. So that is something to look forward to in 2023. And one last point on the Azure VM standpoint. Before you go and kind of explore that on your own, please reach out to us because we have identified the optimal resources and types of resources to use so we can get you a good kind of cost estimate if you wanted to switch to an Azure VM, because if the resources aren't optimized, you would be looking at a potentially a large price tag, and could dissuade you from going that route. We have found cost-effective ways to source the VM in Azure, so definitely lean on us as a resource if that is a path that you want to walk down. So yeah, so I believe that's everything to cover. We'll wait just a second longer if there's any more Q&A. If not, we'll look to wrap up today's webinar. Awesome.
all right. Well, I think that's gonna be just about everything that we want to cover. Um, Thank you guys once again for joining us for our monthly town hall. We really appreciate you guys coming in and giving us the opportunity to address any questions or take a look at anything you guys are interested in seeing. And we will meet up with all of you guys again next month at the beginning of the month, as always, with a lot more stuff to review as we get closer to that next update release. Um, Thank you again, guys, and have an excellent rest of your week.